ليلهم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة، ليلهم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة. نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح. ليلهم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة، ليلهم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة. ونحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us from wherever you are in the world. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that this event is held primarily in Borlu on sovereign Wajak Noongar Boja. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present, and to First Nations people across the continent of so-called Australia. Gedamna Elsabah Cultural Forum, as a group of settler refugees, extends our solidarity to First Nations people across this continent and across the world, and acknowledges that the systems which allow us relative safety here in so-called Australia are the same ones which create oppression and dispossession in this settler colony. We recognize that sovereignty was never ceded. This is and always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Gedamna Elsabah Cultural Forum is concerned with creative and cultural work and the edification of its intersections with civil political resistance. This forum is committed to human rights issues and the effective role of the arts in political and social change. This event we're holding today, during International Human Rights Day, is to raise awareness of the situation in Sudan and to practice active and radical solidarity. Today, you'll hear from poets across the world as they share their poems for Sudan. But Sudan is not the only place that's facing atrocities. So we would like to acknowledge all of the genocides, seen and unseen, everything that our siblings are experiencing across the world, whether it's in Chad or Palestine, and we would like to pay our respects and extend our solidarity. Today, you'll be hearing from fabulous poets and artists from around the world. And this event is actually dedicated to the late and great Sudanese poet, Kamal al-Jazuli. Kamal al-Jazuli passed away in the early hours of Monday, November 6th in Cairo, and will be remembered by his country and abroad for his unequivocal stance for human rights. He's devoted all his career to his work as a lawyer and an activist, and his fathomless creative talent as a poet, writer, and to defending his people's aspirations for justice and democracy. Jazuli was born in 1947, and he studied abroad in the College of International Law and International Relations in the Kiev Governmental University, and his return home to Sudan coincided with a volatile era in Sudanese history. Tension was still in the air following the events of the 1917 the massacre in May of 1917, when the dictatorship butchered many of the Communist Party senior leadership in the aftermath of their aborted coup against President Nimeri. Al-Jazuli was in and out of prison several times during the mid-70s and early 80s, and later in the late 90s following the Islamist coup. Those eventful times have had their imprint on his poetry. Incarceration and persecution feature prominently across his critically acclaimed collection Omdurman comes on the 8 o'clock train. In those pieces, he describes his emotions in response to the imminent threat as he remains imprisoned. Besides his poetry collections, Al-Jazuli had 6 other books and hundreds of published articles and research papers on diverse topics ranging from culture and politics, literature, literary criticism, to issues of peace, democracy, civil war, human rights. Some of his poetry and fiction were translated into English, Russian, and Ukrainian. He was a founding member of the Sudanese Writers' Union and served as its Secretary General until 2007. He was a PEN International Laureate and an honorary member of its London office. And this eulogy for the great Kamal Al-Jazuli was written by Ustaz Mr. Adil Babikir. Adil Babikir is a translator and an Arabic content manager at Madallah Investment Company in Abu Dhabi. He's translated and edited several works, including Modern Sudanese Poetry, an anthology published in 2009, and Mensi, a Rare Man in His Own Way by Tayyib Salah. Today, Dr. Vivienne Glance will read 2 poems by Kamal Al-Jazuli, translated by Mr. Adil Babikir.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll read the 2 poems. The first one is called Whispers. It's not murder that I dread, not even a tragic end, nor this door being blown down outright, or them storming in at midnight, their naked guns in full sight. No, not festering wounds, streams of blood, or the wall dotted with fragments of my skull. What I fear the most, I have to say, is fear per se, that devious and elusive thing that in a twinkling can sneak in, whispering deluded excuses, temptingly fancy while stealthily injecting weakness and despondency into the inner pores of my soul. That elegant, eye-catching thing luring me into watching its glaring blade. And once, for a second or two, I am dazzled by the glow. It slips in, splitting me into 2. A half up there in its illusionary world, dying twice, and a half down here, half dead. You are destined to die, and so are they. No one is exempt. So voice your rejection right here. Out there, your defiant voice will come out, pretty strong and vocal. Die here, to live there. And the second poem is called Encounter. In the late hours of the night, off the fence of the grand mosque, a male leper, shabby and frail, stealthily creeps into the bosom of a fellow leper, just as shabby and frail, and they embrace. With palms as camel's hoofs and 3 timber-dry arms, they embrace in the wee hours of the night off the fence of the grand mosque. But the last passerby, who airs his belly on the floor and goes on his way, is too drunk and drowsy to see. He has just blown off an intimate moment, bitterly fought for. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vivienne, for reading those translations. Yeah, for beginning this event with such a wonderful way, and we can dedicate it to the late great Commander Jazuli.
ليلوم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة، ليلوم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، ليلوم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة، ليلوم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة، ونحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح. ليلوم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة، ليلوم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، ليلوم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة، ليلوم الخوف والكوابيس والخيانة، ونحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح، نحنا قدامنا الصباح.